You're the person. Okay, my first. Do we get started? So welcome to beautiful Rab Hall from the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay. My name is Elizabeth Morris. In 2019, Kathy Young and Vicki Smith initiated the Homelessness Task Force as part of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay with the purpose of increasing understanding of homelessness in Boston and promoting effective prevention and treatment programs through public education and advocacy. Homelessness is an enormous problem in our nation, in our state, in our city, and in our neighborhood. It's the responsibility of every neighborhood to provide an adequate supply of affordable housing so those who make our city work can afford to live in our neighborhood. And it's the responsibility of every neighborhood to provide supportive housing and services so those in need of assistance can stay housed and off the streets. The Boston Public Library has been our partner in providing a forum for us to learn about the innovative efforts in our city and state to prevent and treat homelessness. And we thank David Leonard and the BPL for allowing us to use this magnificent space to gather and learn from the experts in the field. We especially thank the energetic and professional program support staff and audiovisual staff at the BPL who make all this come to reality. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing David Leonard, president of the Boston Public Library and a great partner of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay.
Thank you, Liz. And it's certainly not a case of us allowing you to use the library. It is your library after all. And so we're thrilled once again to be your partners for tonight's program. Indeed, thank you to all of the leaders of the Neighborhood Association of the Back Bay and of the Homelessness Task Force in particular for continuing to bring our attention and keep our attention on this particularly challenging topic. One that we feel as part of the Back Bay, but that we feel as part of our city, our state, our nation as well. We have a great program lined up. You have amazing speakers and guests. And surely, we need to recognize, that shelter, housing insecurity do remain one of the top challenges facing us all. And we want to ensure that our responses as a civic body, as a society, as a city, remain both adequate and dignified. The library, too, is actually engaged directly in this work. You will hear a little bit later from one of our colleagues about our social work response team. And we are in the process of seeing 3 of our forthcoming branch renovations contribute under the city's Housing with Public Assets redevelopment plan. So we will have, we hope, 3 branches that will have housing as part of those developments. And now to tonight's program. I'm thrilled to get out of your way quickly and but introduce to you our moderator and MC for the program tonight. She is Shirley Leung, one of the Boston Globe's columnists. She's an associate editor, adept at grappling with very complex issues. She's also a frequent guest and contributor in our GBH studio upstairs, our other partners, usually on Boston Public Radio. And so please join me in welcoming Shirley Leung.
Thank you, David. I was just here on Tuesday and I got a chance to sit in your lovely courtyard beforehand. So thank you to NABB. Thank you to all of you who are here. I'm just going to do some housekeeping, very brief remarks. You know, we've known for a long time that Boston has a very expensive housing market, and that has created a lot of have and have-nots. But the pandemic has truly deepened housing inequality, and a lot more households are struggling to pay the rent and mortgage. And the Boston Foundation, I don't know if you saw today, they issued their annual housing report. And here are some stunning statistics from that report. The median price of a single family home in Greater Boston is now $763,000. That's more than 26% higher than in 2019. I still remember not that long ago, we thought $400,000 was a lot of money and out of reach. About 45% of the renters in Greater Boston spend more than 30% of their income on rent. These are the households that are known as cost burden, and we'll hear a little bit more about them later tonight. Renters of color are particularly hard hit. Half of Black renters and Latino renters are considered cost burden. And the region's poorest residents, this is one of the most fascinating stats, have seen their housing costs surge 19% over the decade, the same rate as their overall income. But when you look at the wealthiest 10%, they saw their incomes grow 3 times as their housing costs. Now, bringing down prices is all about supply and demand, right? We all know that. But the region is really far behind on in terms of increasing supply. And then you layer on the opioid crisis, the mental health crisis, and we start to see more people living on the street, most notably on Mass and Cass, but you know, we see it here also in the Back Bay and throughout the city and the region, and even in the suburbs now. So we're here tonight to learn more about the scope of the problem and the solutions. And we're going to have a series of short PowerPoints to set the table in the conversation. I prepared a few questions, but we want the audience to also participate. We'll have is it Kirsten? Kirsten will be running around with note cards so you can write down questions. And if you're joining us online, you can submit questions from the Q&A function. I think the chat function has been turned off. So we're going to hear first up from Sheila Dillon. Sheila, that's your cue. So Sheila is the Chief of Housing for the City of Boston. She has served in this role for 4 mayors: Tom Menino, Marty Walsh, Kim Janey, and now Michelle Wu. And Sheila was one of the first people named to Michelle Wu's cabinet. And that was because she wanted to signal that one of her priorities as mayor is building affordable housing and finding solutions for Mass and Cass. So Sheila, come on up.
So when I think about being in this position for quite a while now, and then I hear and look at the stats, I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing wrong, right? But a lot of good work is taking place. So thank you, and thank you to NABB for having this forum tonight and for inviting me back. I just want to say before I start a very quick presentation that NABB has been instrumental in really trying to help us find solutions for homelessness, being there supporting local programs, Women's Lunch Place, Pine Street Inn, and also welcoming new housing for our homeless in this very neighborhood. So I really want to thank them. It's not every neighborhood that's doing that, especially now. So I'm not gonna give you definitions, so let's talk a little, I just want to give you set the table and talk a little bit about the housing condition in Boston, and then summarize our priorities as the new administration. What are we working on first and foremost? So we have been working really hard to increase supply, even though our numbers are we're a very expensive city. Rents and sales prices aren't increasing as fast as other areas because of the increase in supply. But Boston has 290,000 units of housing. 56,000 or 19% of those are deed restricted affordable. Now, I'm not here to tell you that's enough. It is not enough, but it's the highest percentage compared to any other major city in the United States. So a lot of us have been working really hard on that number. A few other things, the vast majority of those units are rental housing, serving our seniors, special populations. 9,800 of the 56,000 are housing that we are setting aside for both homeless individuals and families. We have about 800 units right now in the pipeline, ready to start construction or renovation to serve our homeless. Now, bringing it very much home to you all, we have affordable housing throughout the city of Boston, but some parts of the city have a lot of affordable housing and some neighborhoods don't have as much. We are really looking at the neighborhoods that don't have as much affordable housing as a percentage of the total. And we're really very interested in getting them closer to the citywide average of 19%. You'll notice at Roxbury, 54%, Chinatown, 50%. But then when you look at Back Bay and Beacon Hill, and I recognize there's not a lot of land here, it's a preserved neighborhood, there's not a lot of opportunity, the percentages are low at 6%. So we're very anxious to create more affordable housing in these neighborhoods, and also make sure that inclusionary development, inclusionary development program where units are built as part of a market rate development, stay on site, stay in the neighborhood. So just a couple of very sort of depressing stats here. You may have seen on Twitter today or in the paper that Boston's one bedrooms were over 3,000. That's downtown data. That's not accurate. Citywide, it's about the median rent is 2,500. Back Bay and Beacon Hill certainly more expensive. Change from last year, either it's slightly down or certainly pretty stable. Sales prices. Sales prices in Back Bay and Beacon Hill are really depressing. And I hear this a lot from many of you, that families that love this neighborhood, that want to stay in this neighborhood, are being priced out. And certainly this number would reinforce that idea and that thought and that reality. So, you know, your median sales price in 2022, 1.2 million against a citywide average of 775, all way too high. So we really are working really hard to build more affordable home ownership and support home buyers with low cost mortgages and down payments. But those numbers certainly are staggering. Housing need, it was mentioned. There's a lot of our residents that are severely cost burdened. Renters, 52,000 households are paying more than 50% of their income towards rent. 12,000, almost 13,000 owners, mostly seniors on fixed income, are also severely cost burdened. If you add up when I look at the homeless numbers, it didn't get changed, but the math is wrong. It's 1350 something for 57. But homeless individuals, our point in time count in February, there were 1,240 homeless individuals living in shelter and 119 on the street. Now, we don't want any homeless individuals or families to be living in Boston. The street number, I hate to do this because it's 119 people living on the street in February, but it is the lowest unsheltered rate in the country. And I want to thank you all for that, because you're allowing permanent supportive housing to be built. 929 Boston families were homeless in February as well. So I'm glad it was mentioned. We're focusing a lot more on housing and race and the intersection of those two. Boston has a very low home ownership rate. 35% of all households own their own home. But if you look against race, there's great disparities. 44% of white households own their own home. 31% of Black. And then if you look at Latinx, 17%. Though that really is very, very troubling. So we're being much more intentional about getting our products and our services and our credit boosters and all of our programs really focused on trying to get all, to increase homeownership overall, but really be very intentional about reaching races that are behind the citywide white average. Housing and race, when you look at who is cost burdened in the city, once again, you see disparities in race. 17% of white households are severely cost burdened, but then look at the numbers, Black 32%, Latinx 31%. So those households that are severely cost burdened are also families and households of color. We don't have good data on who is being evicted by race, but when you overlay eviction data, like by address and against neighborhood, you can start to see trends that more households of color are being evicted. So if you're not depressed, don't be depressed. Don't be depressed. A lot of good work is being done. We're really, I should always come and just say all the great stuff that's happening, but I do feel like we need to be honest. But what have we been focused on in the last 10 months? So the mayor, you may have read, we got a significant amount of federal funding, ARPA funding, and she has pledged over 200 million of that ARPA funding to increase the supply of affordable housing. So right now we are getting a lot of housing in the pipeline and in construction, and we'll be, have to spend that money over the next, committed by 24, spent by 26. So we're really working very, very hard to spend that money to create more affordable housing. We recently completed a publicly owned land audit that's complete, and we have identified small parcels and large parcels where there's bigger opportunity, and we're starting to have community conversations about really developing a lot of affordable housing on these sites. And David Leonard is right. We are also looking at buildings as a public asset, and we are looking to build affordable housing over libraries. In fact, there's a meeting tonight, right, in the West. Also we're increasing resources for housing. We really need to pass. And if there's one takeaway tonight, help us pass in the next legislative session, the transfer fee. And the transfer fee bill says, if you have a transaction over $2 million, you're going to pay 2% of that transaction. We're going to take 2% of that, what you make on that transaction, and we're going to put it towards affordable housing. So it's only going to impact, last year it would have been 700 transactions, and it would have raised $100 million in 1 year. We really need to harness the economic strength of this city and help those that are less fortunate. We're going to refile. We're probably going to make some tweaks to make it, to make more of our elected officials like the bill, but that would be such a game changer. We're also looking at updating our linkage policy. Can we extract more from commercial developments? You may have read last week or a couple days ago that we had a great success in East Boston, taking units out of the speculative market. We need to do more of that. And we're looking at inclusionary development program. Can developers are doing residential properties development, can they provide a higher percentage of affordable units? One more slide. Until we build enough affordable housing, we have to keep our tenants safe. We have to stop evictions. So what do we need to do? We need to pass rent stabilization. As you know, the mayor is for rent stabilization. It was voted out in 1993. We want to bring it back, but we want to bring it back in a way that it doesn't impact new construction. TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, we need to get that passed. Right to counsel. Let's make it like many other cities and states, mandatory that if a household is going into court to be evicted, they have legal representation. And we are working really hard. Our eviction numbers are down, providing rental relief, legal assistance, housing search, first and last. Our phones are lighting up every single day with tenants that need help, and we're continuing to do that. So I will close. I talked a lot, but that's the state of Boston, but I don't want you to lose hope. I think a lot of good work is going on, and certainly there's more to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl. I have lots of questions for you later, so we'll wait. So this is Joyce Tavon. She's a Senior Director of Policy and Programs at Massachusetts Housing and Shelter Alliance. I think she's going to have a little PowerPoint too. She has worked for more than 30 years to advance solutions to homelessness. At MASA, she develops and implements policy strategies and oversees its role as a funding intermediary for permanent supportive housing and other programs. And maybe you could also define, permanent
Right,
supportive housing
right.
for us. All right, we got slides for Joyce? Oh, maybe you do it.
Maybe I do it.
Yeah, maybe you do it.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. And thank you. And I will be very brief. That was a lot of great data that Sheila shared with us. What I'm going to do is tell you very quickly kind of who we are and zoom back out to the state overall, and then a little about permanent supportive housing. So MAHASA, we are a statewide organization. We are dedicated to the ending of homelessness in Massachusetts. Our particular focus is around what's called unaccompanied adults. So particularly individuals who are experiencing long-term homelessness may have disabling conditions. And we work with 100 or so community-based organizations across the state. Our focus is how do we get past kind of emergency responses as our sole response and moving more and more towards advancing solutions. And that's really, I think, where we have made a lot of headway in the last few decades. And I'll touch on what that means. And just real quickly, I won't cover all this, how we do this work is advocacy and planning. We're also an intermediary of funding that often can test and advance new approaches, technical assistance, and a lot of partnership at the local, state, level and regional level, and with a lot of providers across. So, but let me jump right to kind of what is permanent supportive housing, because tonight we're talking about affordable housing in general, and then kind of zooming in when we talk about people who are experiencing long-term homelessness and may struggle with whether it's mental health issues, substance addiction, health issues, et cetera. What is it we're talking about there? So a few key features. And I'm going to jump to the third one. One, we're talking about something that is permanent, not a homeless shelter, but a home. Above it, that it's affordable. Housing that is deeply affordable means the rents are covered, tenants are paying no more than 30% of their income in rent. That leading bullet point, and what makes it that PSH, is the supportive services. And that means that tenants are helped sustain and stabilize in their housing. Everything from, budgeting and finding a job and getting income benefits and accessing healthcare, mental health services and addiction treatment, and on and on. And the final bullet in our lingo is housing first. And basically what that means is that's what needs to happen first. And once you have the stability of a roof over your head and you're not figuring out, where am I going to sleep tonight? Where am I getting my next meal? It is so much easier to work with people and engage them and get them thinking about what can come next, and not forcing people to be a good client in order to do that, but rather have tenancy expectations and continue to try to engage people and invite them into the work of how they're going to rebuild their lives. So that is what we call PSH, permanent supportive housing. So why do it? And it works, and it actually is less costly than homelessness. First, it works. Average 85% housing retention rate after 1 year, and there are some links to some of the reports that we have. Our organization has been involved in over the years, tracking of 2,400 people in housing, and a subset of about 1,000 tracked over 15 years, and the vast majority still housed. Additionally, costs go down. There's an average of about 5,200 reduction in healthcare costs per year for individuals once they are in this kind of housing versus in experiencing homelessness. And this is like very solid data. There's a link to an extensive study that was done that really looked at Medicaid data, Medicaid claims data, comparing the folks in this cohort who are in supportive housing to a comparable group who are homeless. So don't take my word on it. The data is really showing it. Costs go down, people remain housed. So what's the need and what's available? And I will completely admit, we are still working on how do we get really good data statewide. I've pulled a few numbers on the need from our statewide rehousing data collective. And I know one of our policymakers in the state who plays such a lead role in helping create that is here tonight. There's still a long way for us to go in getting good data, but across the state, what we now know is sort of first quarter of this year, over 18,000 people were experiencing homelessness. That is not to say that all of them need this particular type of housing, right? Most people, they just need something that's affordable, but there's that subset. So that subset is, I talked about the folks that have long-term homelessness, disabling conditions. Our best kind of estimate right now is the folks that get defined as chronically homeless. So 3,400 statewide in that category. In terms of inventory, still work in progress, getting really solid numbers. The roughly 10,000 units here, that's a very kind of narrow definition of what's supportive housing. You saw in Sheila's slides, the city alone is, and rightfully is claiming more than 9,000 units. This is like this very strict HUD definition and how it gets identified across the state. And it points to why we need to all do better at identifying what is the need of people side, and people are going to keep flowing in, that we have to work on that, and to what is our current inventory so that we can continue to improve at our planning for what comes next. And then, finally, that's how you can reach us to connect with us. And I will stop there so we can continue on. Thank you.
All right, there's going to be a quiz afterwards. There's lots of numbers, right? So this is Chanda Smart. Chanda is the CEO of Onyx Group. After a corporate career at Deloitte, Gillette, and American Express, Chanda got into real estate business in 2016 with a focus on the real residential market. Last year, she launched Onyx Group, a Black woman-owned and operated brokerage and development company. And I love their tagline, people who built affordable housing never had to live in it. So, and the Onyx Group has active projects, including in Foxborough. And recently, congratulations, you won the bid for Roxbury's Parcel 3. So Chanda is a longtime resident of Roxbury, and we got to know each other this year. I think now we've met twice, right? In person. So anyways, here you go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's an honor to be included into this important conversation. A little bit about me is I'm from Roxbury, and 2 years ago, my partner and I, Shabnam Mashmasarmi, decided to start the Onyx Group. As a Boston-based Black women-owned development and brokerage company, we realized that there was a need to change the landscape. And again, our why was that people that built affordable housing never had to live in it. Changing the affordable housing climate and dynamic was necessary to create developments that invest in the residents in our community. And to do that, we also had to establish city and state and private partnerships. We also realized to effectively make a difference, as Sheila pointed out, that we can't simply do it alone, all hands on deck. We all are interconnected, and it's important that we all support one another because of the synergy and the ecosystem that is created just by being a part of this, the housing climate. One of the things that we learned in development in the very short time that we've started Onyx is that our lessons. We submitted our first proposal last year. It was called Crescent Parcel and Cass Cross. We affectionately called it Cass Crossing. We noticed that there was no precedent. There was a lack of Black women developers, and we set out to change that landscape. We also realized that we needed to work with the city and state to incentivize the creation of affordable home and business ownership. And luckily, with partners like Sheila, Dylan, have a undying commitment to see this happen, we realized that they're not bad people. They will work with us, and they will work, and they have a mission to do so. And while doing that, developing housing that fosters growth and independence. The other thing we realized is that two Black women cannot walk in a bank, ask for $5 million and say, we want to build affordable housing. It just doesn't happen. And especially with the focus on increasing the quality of housing and advocacy and partnerships and programs. So we decided to work smarter and not harder. And we were recognized by the amazing women of Peabody Properties, Karen and Melissa Fishwill, who noticed that in order for us to do this, we needed to scale, and we couldn't scale alone. And we needed help, we needed advocacy, and we needed that big sister to just help us do that. And as a result, Peabody Properties worked with Onyx to submit a proposal for affordable homeownership, 200 units in Foxborough, which in March of this year we won. First Black women-owned company to do so. But most importantly, again, it really reiterated the need and emphasized the need for advocacy and partnership. The other partnership that we have, as Shirley highlighted, is HYM and My City at Peace. We're co-developers with them for the Parcel 3 project. That parcel is the last largest parcel in Roxbury, spanning 7.7 acres. And the importance of that partnership is that HYM and My City at Peace partnered with 5 dynamic local businesses that literally will change their lives, but also change the lives of the community. They're helping us scale. So after this project, we can do this on our own and really begin to implement our vision, collective visions. And again, all of these partnerships really emphasize the need to bridge the gap with the public, private, and the community. Again, one of our current projects is 200 senior affordable housing units in Foxborough. These are partners, Peabody Properties, Affordable Housing Service Collaborative, NEI, UTILE, and Onyx Group. And we're really proud to be a part of that project. P3, 184 homeownership units. That's significant for Roxbury. I grew up literally a block from this property and this parcel, and this is a game changer in terms of revitalizing the community, offering home ownership, having your community have a significant stakeholder in that development is a game changer, and we're thankful to be part of that. And p3roxbury.com, you can see the entire team and see the project and how it's advancing. The other important partnership that we're proud of is working with the People's Corporation. They have just been approved to have a 100% affordable partner development in Back Bay, and including us in that project was not only significant because they were out-of-towners, but it also expressed their need. It was apparent for them that they needed to partner with local talent to affect that change and be a part of the and really be a part of the community. Winthrop Center is no different in terms of Kathy McNeil has just been an amazing force and advocate for affordable housing and a support for Onyx Group also. So that's the importance for us to be able to have the opportunity to build is personal on so many levels. I grew up in affordable housing, and my mother was an addict. She was homeless. My father was an addict. He was homeless. And so I'm aware of all the effects of what homelessness does and the lack of equity. And it's amazing to be a part of the community with all hands on deck, because that's what's important and that's what's needed for us to really, really make change with public and private partnerships. So thank you for your time.
Hello? Oh, wow, this is great.
It works. It works.
It works. So this is like a PowerPoint break, if you will. So we're just gonna do a little mini fireside chat. We have, sorry, I get my notes. Matt Pine right here. He's a licensed clinical social worker. He's the director of housing programs at Pine Street Inn. His experience in supporting tenants in Pine Street programs first began as a clinician in Pine Street's substance use treatment program. And today his focus is on tenant-centered services and community building. And in nearly a decade at Pine Street, Matt has overseen the service expansion of new programming of 100 units of housing and directs the development of services on site at 140 Clarendon Street. And next to him is Frank. Frank is an Army veteran who has lived on the street and with the help of Pine Street Inn has a job and a place to live. Before we begin our conversation with Matt and Frank, Frank has prepared some remarks about his journey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Frank Stewart. Pardon me 1 second. I broke my glasses, so I might have to juggle all this. Just a little bit about myself and a little bit about the journey. I grew up in Dorchester in a tight-knit family. My parents instilled a strong work ethic in us kids. Throughout my adult life, I've often worked 2 jobs, working days in construction and nights in food services. Despite this, I became homeless in my late 50s. I dropped out of high school to serve in the Army. After my discharge, I moved to Virginia for better job opportunities. I have a wonderful daughter and granddaughter there now. I was living with them for a couple of years, but my daughter is getting married, so I made the choice to move back to Boston. I lived here with my brother for a few months, but we weren't getting along as roommates. He was the older, I was the younger. I moved out and ended up becoming homeless. I was living on the streets for 6 months before coming to Pine Street Inn. When you're homeless, people see you and they cross the street to avoid you. And that really does something to your psyche. I had heard about Pine Street over the years, but I resisted going there. Finally, on last New Year's Eve, I decided to get help. I stayed in the Pine Street shelter and was able to join the I-Cater food service training program. I-Cater training is a great mix of learning from the chefs in the kitchen and classes that give you like financial literacy and mindfulness. By making food for others, I feel like I'm able to give back. Now that I have the training, experience, and more resources, I'm ready to pay it forward. Recently, Pine Street helped me find supportive housing. They've been excellent. I just can't say enough about Pine Street. They helped me get all my paperwork. I needed a new birth certificate, social security card, a new ID. I needed all this before I could fill out the application for housing. I'm in my new apartment now and getting back on my feet. I recently completed the I-Cater program and I've lined up several job interviews with the help of Pine Street's job placement team. The level of patience and the passion to help people at Pine Street is incredible. The help is there. You have to be willing to do the work to make things happen. Thank you.
Frank, this all took place since last New Year's Eve?
Yep.
Wow.
And I went in there sober and they couldn't believe it.
Wow. Congratulations. Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So Matt, I wanted you to walk through what supportive housing looks like. And then the kinds of services Pine Street offers to its tenants.
So permanent supportive housing looks like a home. It looks like an apartment building. Most of Pine Street's buildings, when you walk by them, you wouldn't tell that they're Pine Street's buildings because they're part of the community. And what permanent supportive housing services does is enable our tenants to really be successful and keep that, because homelessness damages everything. So the pairing of support services with the affordable housing option and the permanence helps folks, not just address a situation of homelessness, but all the damage that has been exacerbated and continued and created along the way. And that doesn't happen overnight, and that takes everyone to, again, invest in a community of residents, of support staff, of neighbors. And what our staff do on site is help the individuals that we support identify what goals are most relevant to them over the length of their time with us, which is a long time, which is permanent, as well as get to know their neighbors and have real relationships and have sustainable relationships, and learn new skills and acquire new resources, because the housing situation is a different thing to survive and thrive in than a homelessness situation. And both take a lot of skill, and having different skill takes a lot of support.
Frank, talk about where you live now, and was it, what I hear is it's for people who are unsheltered, it can be very difficult to kind of to move somewhere, to move into somewhere that's more permanent. I mean, they're used to a community on the street and used to kind of this transient life. So what was it
Like a
for you?
tent.
Yeah, you're like, right. So what was it like for you? How did you break that cycle, I guess?
Through Pine Street's housing specialist, number one, I have to make a shout out to one person in particular, two people in particular for the housing. They got me. They said, you're going to see it. I said, all right, let's go. Deb Green at Pine Street and Lisa Dunstan at Pine Street. They helped me tremendously. Where I'm at now is over in Brighton. It's called Brighton Marine. It's veterans housing, pretty much as what it is. And when I walked in, I felt like I was back in the service. I was at home. The grounds looked familiar. Cut lawns, on-site laundry, $1.50 for a load of laundry. I was freaked out. I said, wow, it's not $6. And yeah, it's just a great place. They have counseling there. They have AA meetings, if you like. They have counselors that you see. They'll take you to doctor's appointments. They'll help you as long as you're helping yourself. And it's just a beautiful place, and I'm very grateful for all the help that I've gotten. And it's not too late to start over. I'm going to be 62 in another month. So I'm living life.
It's great. Matt, one of the things we've been talking about is building more affordable housing, building more supportive housing. And in your decade, nearly a decade working at Pine Street, I mean, do you find communities are more welcoming or less welcoming to affordable housing?
It depends if they know us. So when I say Pine Street and I say Thanksgiving at Pine Street, you might think of, okay, big room, lots of people, volunteers, folks having a communal meal. In permanent supportive housing, they're cooking their own turkey in their own oven, and if they want support, they'll ask for it. And with communities that don't know that or haven't learned or just haven't been exposed to us, they hear Pine Street, they hear shelter, and then that brings a lot of different assumptions, which if we were talking about a shelter, when we're talking about developments, that's a fair conversation. But when we're talking about housing and we're assuming shelter, we're off to a rough start. And so communities that have gotten to know us and that we're already in know that we participate in the neighborhood associations and that we're responsive neighbors. And if they have an issue that they can call us and we'll work with our residents. And normally they call us and we're like, yeah, we already know we're taking care of something. And the issue was someone was trying to prey on my tenants. Someone was trying to get into our buildings. And so the security assumptions of shelter versus like the health and safety realities of a community that's focused on developing dignity in a home is really the key difference. And the communities that we are already in are okay with us coming back. The communities that we're not there yet have a lot of misattributions about what we're doing.
Can you say which communities Pine Street is in now?
So we're in Dorchester, Roxbury, Charlestown, Brookline, South End, around the block over at New Chardon Street, up the street. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but we have 26 permanent supportive housing sites spread out across the greater Boston area. And again, we're probably around the block from you don't know.
And then Frank, what would you say to communities that are nervous about seeing more affordable housing or supportive housing? I mean, you gave that, I mean, you talked about being homeless and people crossing the street, not
Oh,
looking you in the eye. So how do we bridge that? How do we make people comfortable?
I say, do your homework, you know, look into it, see what the programs are all about. And not everybody's out there to rape, pillage, burn, you know what I mean? They're looking for help. Some are, some aren't. That's just a fact of life. And for me, I know you've heard this before, it's a hand up, not a hand out. If you offer the help and people know where to go, I was reluctant, like Matt was touching on. He said, you know, people, where was I going? Yes, the shelter. I've known about Pine Street since I was a teenager driving by. That's where all the junkies were and the winos on the sidewalk. It's not that. I didn't know going in that all these programs existed until I looked into it, and I was pointed in the right direction. This is what you got to do. You need this, this, and this. We'll help you get that. Get a job, you get some training, and then you get housing, and there it is. I mean, these programs work, but people need to be aware that they're out there, and the help is there. You got to be willing to get it.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll go back to one short PowerPoint, one more PowerPoint. So, Matt, I was really fascinated when you talked about permanent supportive housing being really the housing of last resort. That meaning that that you would like to see more housing built, affordable housing built, so that we don't need so much permanent supportive housing. So talk a little bit, how do we break that cycle? Like what needs to happen?
So you can't house homeless people without housing. And you can't prevent chronic homelessness without more housing. And you just can't take that out of the equation. And it was talked about earlier that acute responses to chronic conditions. So if I give a sandwich to someone who's homeless, that helps them in that moment. That doesn't help them housed. And I think we're all, as a community, more comfortable in the moment than we are in the long term. But chronic homelessness is, again, homelessness hurts everything. And I focused on the individual before, but it's the rest of us in the communities too. And in a city like Boston, where we have all the, we've pooled the resources of the region having a large city. We have a bunch of hospitals. We have a bunch of other, like large community services that small towns don't have. A larger community offers more services, offers more support for their residents, and that includes affordable housing.
All right, well, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Matt. We're going to see you in a few more minutes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, last PowerPoint is from Jonna Gifford. She's the Chief of Adult Library Services at Boston Public Library. She manages a number of teams, community learning, adult programs, Kirstein, Business Library and Innovation Center, and the service and reference and research for adults across the library system and social work. So you got a lot of jobs. I hope David Leonard's going to give you a raise. Anyways, all right, take it away.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Jonna. Nice to see you here in RAB. Welcome back to the library, or welcome to the library if you've never been. Yeah, so I always joke, when you're a librarian and you meet people, they immediately want to tell you about the children's librarian that they knew when they were a kid. And the story about, how meaningful the library was to them as a child. But I work with adults, so I'm always like, do you come to the library now? Like, what about, yeah. So we serve adults all the time. And in particular, and I think many of you realize this, and my thanks to NABB, many of you know, in fact, that our spaces are sort of an equivalent to a day shelter for folks who are homeless or in other kinds of crises in their lives. So I have some good news for you. In fact, the library is now in in Mayor Wu's Human Services Cabinet. We've been moved from arts and culture into human services, and I think this just illustrates how much work we're doing in this particular area. So I'm lucky enough, we created a community learning team within the last 2 years. And I'm lucky enough to oversee that group. Specifically, we wanted to really put our attention on services. For example, we have a new health and human services specialist, right? And that's, we've seen what with the housing crisis, with the opioid crisis in the last few years, we wanted to have a librarian who is an information specialist in the field of human services. So I'll tell you more about what Sophie does. Eventually, we will be hiring a mobile outreach coordinator. We want to get outside the building into other spots, working with in Boston Housing Authority locations, for example, teaching tech literacy, getting into senior residences and helping people. We want to do library work outside of library buildings, so we call that outreach in my field. We do a tremendous amount of tech assistance for adults, and obviously for folks who are unhoused, who are using, right, they use our spaces. We're a safe, warm space in the winter, quiet sometimes, a lot of time. In the summer, we're a cool place. Obviously access to public restrooms. You can sit here all day long and think or read or use the computers if you don't have a computer or a phone. And so we're just learning that we need to have staff who can interact with folks and help them with their technology and their literacy issues. You mentioned financial literacy earlier. We do that work in our business library. I'm very happy coming out of the pandemic, our work with folks who are seeking jobs. We do a tremendous amount of work for people who are looking for jobs. And in fact, I was at the Boston Foundation this morning for their report on the housing situation. And they were talking about how people who want to get on right on lists for affordable housing have to fill out like a 24-page form for every place they're applying. So my staff are people who will sit with you and help you fill out that form. So similar to Pine Street, and Pine Street, thank goodness for you. We are partners, and the work that we do together is so important. So we've actually here in the library created a workforce development, 2 different workforce development positions. We also hired our first career counselor this year. So someone with an MSW background who's working to connect people to recruiters and to do job fairs. We want to, keep moving people through their journey, right? Their job seeking journey. And I could go on about that team, but it really is tremendous. I'm very happy with it and proud of the work we're doing. Our health and human services specialist in particular, she's going to answer questions like these, ladies and gentlemen. So where can I find a shelter tonight? How do I renew my SNAP benefits? How can I get a low-cost cell phone? All of these sorts of benefits that you have to use a computer now in order to apply for. We have so many folks who come into our buildings who either don't have access to a computer or a phone. They can't print out documents, right? So we offer free printing and technology, computer use. How do I enroll in Mass Health? Where can I get a new pair of shoes? A lot of our, like at the West End, our library over the branch over in the West End, they are constantly needing to hand out shoes, slippers to folks who are unhoused and sleeping outside. And so we're just responding to all kinds of questions and needs and trying to be creative. I'm very happy to tell you that we hired our first social worker. So this year in May, we hired a full-time MSW really to work so obviously our health and human services specialist has a library degree. And so her focus really is on information and resources. But we really needed a social worker to join for the things that we're not trained to do in library school, right? So our social worker has come on board. She's doing a needs assessment with our with patrons in need, right? Whether that's housing, if it's mental health issues, addiction issues, et cetera. She's also supervising 2 graduate students in social work this fall. So we're kind of working to build out her team. But she's now liaison with our Pine Street folks who are good enough to come over and also meet with patrons here in the library on Tuesdays. We have hours for Pine Street. So it's been this wonderful connection. We have a lot of partners, and I thank NABB for all the work that you've done in this area. As I say, Pine Street, we go over to the Women's Lunch Place and provide career counseling over there. We work with the Black Seed Writers Group, Fenway Health. We have a nutritional literacy coordinator now at the Roxbury branch who's offering programming like what kind of healthy meals can you make if you are using SNAP benefits, for example, or budgeting and food, healthy eating and things like that. We have a beautiful new nutrition lab over at the Roxbury branch. If you haven't been, it's really gorgeous over there, so check it out. We also have partners like the Harvard's Legal Services. They come and do office hours here for free for people who need legal guidance. As I say, Taylor Morris, our new social worker, she's doing needs assessment both with our staff, because she's going to be helping with the wellness and professional development of our staff, training around dealing with folks who are in crisis. We want to just keep getting better about that. And then she's also managing and working with patrons who need services. So so it's very exciting that we're kicking this off. We're also hoping to work with the Department of Mental Health to bring in certified peer specialists. So folks who have either been homeless in the past or have struggled with addiction, but are now in recovery. So sort of destigmatizing and they can connect with clients in a way that is much different than a professional social worker some people might shy away from. So it's been very interesting talking to DMH about a possible program. Again, we want to flesh out the social work team so that they can go system wide. We do have 26 different locations for the BPL system. And we're building a lot of partnerships. Sheila, I said 5 minutes. I hope that was 5 minutes. Yeah, Shirley, sorry. Yep.
All right, everybody. Oh, where are you guys coming? All the panelists back on stage. I think we have to be out of here. We got a hard stop tonight. Library closes. Anyways, thank you everyone for your questions. Keep them coming. I'm going to actually start off with some audience questions. Okay, this is for Sheila, but maybe Sheila, you could start. But I guess people want a little more clarity. What is your definition of affordable housing? Is it strictly income restricted, or how do you define affordable housing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I define it because people say, wait a minute, that's not affordable to me. So why you call it affordable housing? I call affordable housing any unit that is deed restricted, right? It's out of the market. It's deed restricted. It has limits on how much can be charged to buy or rent. And it's got an associated income limit. And it's affordable for a long period of time. And it's below the market, certainly. So if it meets those definitions, I call it affordable, although I know it really, sometimes people use below market or deed restricted. But I will say in Boston, there's a range of incomes, right? We are serving homeless populations that have
very, they have no income or, $100 a month income, to those that are making 100% of AMI, which are now like 80 or 90 or 100,000, but it's still below market. So there really is a range. If anyone's very interested in this, we have every unit in Boston cataloged. So you can contact me and I can give you the breakdown of how many units we have in each category.
And is all affordable housing just rental only, or can you own affordable housing too?
We have fewer homeownership units, but and this is something that Chanda's really, really trying to drive home for her community. We are also building for sale housing that is below market and deed restricted. And then, it does homeownership units, you can get an appreciation per year, typically 5%, and then you have to turn around and sell it to the same income band buyer. We need more of that. There's a lot of controversy around deed restrictions these days. Most of our data shows that people that buy deed restricted homes stay in them for about 7 years, take equity out, and then buy in the market.
So one more question from the audience before I go back to my questions. Sheila, you had a slide showing by neighborhoods, Roxbury and Chinatown, roughly half the housing stock is income restricted, but a place like Back Bay, it's only 6%. So what are the opportunities to increase affordable and supportive housing in neighborhoods like the Back Bay, where real estate is so expensive? And Sheila, if you could start us off, but then others can jump in too.
There's less opportunity. There's less opportunity, certainly. I think a good example is 140 Clarendon. It did have some affordable housing, but it also had a hotel. Now the hotel is being converted into affordable housing. So conversions of existing buildings, one. Also, and I hear loud and clear when we're in meetings in Back Bay, you want, if the inclusionary development program, the developer's obligation, you want to stay in the neighborhood and stay on site. And over time, that does build up some supply of affordable housing. So inclusionary development and then conversions of existing buildings.
Joyce or Chanda, this is up your alley too.
Thank you. No, I agree with that. I think that it definitely has to be reflective of the neighborhoods, but it's also incumbent on the developers to step up and work with the cities and say that they're going to provide that also. So again, all hands on deck.
Chanda, why don't we stay with you on this topic? Of, as a private, you're in the private sector, you're developing affordable housing, and you have your mantra, right? People who build affordable housing probably have not lived in it. And so how do you approach affordable housing differently from others?
Well, being from needing for affordable housing gives us that unique lens, first of all, but also working with the community and understanding what their needs are, having your pulse on what's necessary from their standpoint is where we first start. And then we work with our city and state officials to make it happen, because that's one of the important factors of development, right? It's including your city and state officials and making sure they're aware of it so that you have proper advocacy and finding like-minded partners.
And Chanda, as a private developer who's doing affordable housing, what's more difficult? Is the economics of building affordable housing or the politics of affordable housing?
That would depend on who you would ask. However, you can navigate through the politics. What we find is the cost of construction, the market changes, interest rates, all of those factors make it difficult, in addition to the permitting and processes that add to the expenses of. So I definitely would say that it's the economics.
I didn't think it would be the economics. And so how can government, or how can other, I don't know, levers can be pulled to make the economics more I guess appealing for more development?
I think that's the conversations we're having with our city and our state, because there is a deficit, and Sheila's well aware of that. There's a gap, and I think that we have to find creative ways. And I think this is where the private partnerships come into play to fill in some of those gaps also. But I do think that it's more, it's the, you know, that gap that it costs to build affordable housing is really what the challenge is. And we're finding creative ways to tackle that. The ARPA funds, different other sources, and IDP is all tools that the city is proactively recognizing that could make a significant difference.
I want to go back to some of the headlines. Mayor Wu recently has said that she's called on the state to create an additional 1,000 units of housing in order to help alleviate the homelessness at Mass and Cass. Joyce, is that the solution? Is that the magic number, 1,000 units?
1,000 would be a good number to start with. I think overall we're going to need more. And I think it's going to happen, it has to happen through collaboration and partnership, right? All of us working, Boston, the surrounding communities, and the state together to address this.
So how much more than 1,000 then?
Well, I shared the numbers. You know, if we have 3,800 roughly people right now experiencing chronic homelessness, I mean, that gives you some idea of the need. And that's not a static number, but we certainly need several thousand more.
And so Sheila gave us a lot of slides about what's happening in the city of Boston. So what about the surrounding communities or else around the state? Are they doing as much as Boston, or what's happening in other cities, I guess?
Yeah, well, you know, I had the good fortune yesterday. I got to make phone calls to providers around the state. We were involved, our organization was involved in distribution of some of the ARPA funds that are getting targeted, came from the state, and 50 million out of 150 million is getting targeted for supportive housing. And we're part of a special partnership where 15 million was going out. And most of these were projects around the state. So there is a lot going on. It varies. There are plenty of areas where there's kind of greater collaboration, greater city buy-in from that local community, and capacity in other areas where there's a lot to be done to build that capacity. And, you know, we're committed and interested in partnering with communities and with the state to build that capacity so more areas can add supportive housing.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit to kind of talk more about the social services side. When I found what I was surprised when I did my own reporting on Mass and Cass, I was struck by how a lot of people choose to live on the they choose to live on the street. They almost can't break away from the community and of the street. And so, you know, it's really hard to coax them off the street. You know, often they're struggling with addiction or mental health. So, and they don't want services. So how do we solve this? How does this get fixed? And maybe we could start with Jonna, you know, Jonna and Matt and Frank.
Come to the library, clearly. That's a great question. I haven't the slightest idea. I ask that question every day. I'm like, well, what can we do to solve it? I think you're right, though. I think there are plenty of people in transition. We do see people who are temporarily homeless, and we can provide all kinds of service for them here. And then there are folks, as you say, who are chronically homeless, who are struggling with the different issues. You know, I like to think that places like Pine Street and the library, where we provide free service, but you're right, in a way, you do have to ask for it. I think a big thing we struggle with in library is getting people to understand how much more we provide beyond books. So, you know, we're constantly trying to market our own, the stuff that we do that is beyond books. You know, people say that I can't believe you have a social worker. Why? Or, right, like, you have a career counselor. That's so cool. I never would have thought that. So we're trying to do better about making the public aware, or people in need aware of what we've got.
So to to jump off from that too, it's hard to answer this question when every experience of homelessness is different because every person experiencing is different. So I'm just gonna pick themes. But when all else has fallen through, you have a death grip on what works. And it just has to work a little bit. If you get through a day, it works. And that's what chronic homelessness really is it's not thinking in the long term because next week doesn't matter. Today, and where do I sleep? So to engage someone to say, hey, if you stay the course, everything will change for you, but you have to change everything right now that's currently working. And what helps you keep safe, help you keep feeling safe or numb to safety or whatever other elements folks are connecting to survive that experience. For a stranger to walk up to them and say, so stop doing all that and you should do what I should say, what I think will work. Takes a really big relationship and a lot of trust that you don't have on the first conversation.
If I could just add one thing about Mass Task, because I think I don't have any data, but I'm hearing this. So when the tents came down in January of this year, we set up 6 sites, 192 beds, some congregate, everyone had their own room. And it was frustrating at first because we were hearing that people that we had gotten off the street, their tents were gone, they were warm, they were, being cared for, they were being fed, that they were heading back every day. Now, these are folks that had social connections, but they also had addiction. What we've heard from every single site is week 1, every single day, week 2, less, week 3, even less, week 4, week 5. And then people started substituting other relationships and getting into treatment or medically assisted treatment. And then they stopped going back down to mass CAS altogether. So I think it's a combination of getting people out of that environment, making sure they're safe, have what they need, and then they start establishing other relationships and making better choices. So I've heard this from each 6 sites. I don't have any data, but I believe what I'm hearing.
And
I was just gonna say, everything you were saying is correct, but a lot of guys and gals don't know what's available or what's out there. There are a lot of outreach groups out there right now feeding them, feeding us. I'm still a homeless person, although I have a home. I still have friends out there and I care about them and I point them this way. And then it's up to them. I tell them what's here, what's there. And I got guys and gal friends at Pine Street Inn now that are either in the maintenance program or in the ICADA program. Stick around, it works, hang in there. The more education that's out there, the more people that will come in for help, that's what I'm hoping. So, and I know it's all cliche, but until you've walked in that person's shoes, there it is in a nutshell, but thanks.
Now the questions are coming in, a lot of them. So hopefully I can get through all the audience questions. So, how do you act when you encounter a homeless person? What's the right response?
Like anybody else. I think we all have to deal with and constantly work through our own inherent biases that we carry, and it's no different with any stranger. And until you know somebody, you don't know them.
Okay, I'll keep moving along. So I guess this is a question for Sheila. Why is the inclusionary, what do you call, is it the inclusion, what's the full name of it?
Inclusionary Development Program.
Yeah, why is the inclusionary development program so low? 13%, right? IDP, right?
IDP, it is being evaluated right now. We've hired a consultant. We have a technical advisory with developers and advocates on it. They're very, very lively conversations. So we're looking at right now, the consultant's job is to tell us how we can extract more affordable units in market rate development and at the same time not harm feasibility because we also need supply, right? So 20% of nothing is nothing. So we're looking at both of those factors. What is the need? We know it's great. We heard that tonight, but what can we extract without just stopping development in the city? So we're trying to find that fine line. I think we'll probably have recommendations by the end of the year.
Sheila, another one for you, but others can also weigh in. But actually, maybe just you, but anyways, well, actually, Matt can also weigh in too. So if spreading out housing across neighborhoods promotes healthier ecosystems, why is Boston clustering so, doing clusters? I guess it's the centralization argument on mass and caste, really. So why, would you agree or disagree that Boston is centralizing services, I guess?
Centralizing service. Oh, you mean probably the concentration of services in the mass caste area?
Yeah. Well, housing.
Yeah. No, I agree. This woman was saying that, a lot of the affordable housing is really concentrated in certain neighborhoods. I think that's what you're saying. And I agree with you 100%. A lot of our affordable housing was built in the 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. A lot of it was built on vacant land when there was massive disinvestment in neighborhoods like Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. So it's been more about the history of where things have been developed and then the ongoing opportunities where there was space and land. I do believe we have to be more intentional. We're going to have healthy communities if they're racially and economically diverse. So I agree with you that we need to build more affordable housing in areas where they have less than the citywide average. And I hate to say more in areas where they have more than the citywide average because people are really worried about displacement. That's a very complicated question, but I agree with you. We need to, I was very excited to break ground, not me, but I had a shovel too. A nonprofit was out in West Roxbury building 70 units of affordable rental housing, a couple of months ago. And we really need to do that more and more.
Yeah, because well, when you showed that chart, right, Chinatown, Roxbury, 50% income restricted, and I guess the average is what, 19. Is that the goal that Back Bay and others who are in the single digits get up to closer to 19?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I had two of these questions came in, and or two people have asked the same question. And I don't know why, but I guess we should answer it. Which is rent stabilization the same as rent control? Sheila, I think that's you too.
Yeah. So rent stabilization is a I don't know. It's a nice control. Yeah, it is. I think it means the same thing to most people. We are looking at a rent stabilization policy in Boston. I don't have anything to announce tonight. But once again, we're looking at it to stabilize rents, because what we are seeing, sorry, I'm talking too much tonight, but what we are seeing is a lot of buildings are changing hands, especially smaller buildings in neighborhoods. And when these buildings change hands, the rents go through the roof, right? So what we really want to do is we want a policy that allows owners to get a return and even keep up with the cost associated with running the building. But we really want to stop those really drastic, awful rent increases. So rent stabilization, not control.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question. I got to read. Well, I'm not used to reading handwritten notes. So, okay. I don't know what that is.
We have a handle on need, and this is a very inadequate answer, and I apologize. We have a handle on need. We know how much need is in the city. We also know what our population is going to do over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So we're always looking at supply. Our affordable housing response is, or our goals are based on how much resource we anticipate from the federal government, from the state, from the city, from private developers. So we don't say, oh, we need 100 affordable units and we're going to go out and build them. Well, I wish it was that simple. You know, we say we need 70,000 affordable units to meet the need. I'm making this up, but it's probably, you know, somewhat close. Oh my gosh, over the next 5 years, we're going to have enough resources if we do everything we can to really collect and garnish resources to build 10,000. So we're always working in a deficit. I'm not blaming anyone. This sits with us, but the federal government has really walked away from this topic. And so we are always trying to generate more local resources to do the trick. So bad answer, and I apologize for it as someone who works for you. But we are working as hard as we can to build as much affordable housing with the resources that we have. Sorry about that. Wish it was better.
Okay, here's another question. Is there a prioritization of who gets help, such as is the priority short-term or long-term residents? Maybe Joyce and Matt, you can take this on.
Well, for supportive housing, because it's so scarce and we don't have the level of resource that we need, we try to prioritize those with the most urgent, extreme need, the most vulnerable.
Still on? All right. And what Pine Tree does in partnership with the city, we have different programs to meet folks at different stages of their homeless period, to triage folks to try and help them not stay in shelter at all, to engage folks earlier on with resources available to rapidly rehouse them, and really keep that end number of the chronically homeless as small as possible. And so it was a yes or no question. So yes, but not nearly enough.
Okay, great. We have 6 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get through some of these more questions. So as citizens, when we see an opportunity for affordable housing creation, for example, BFIT in the South End, who do we connect with for help?
Call me. Just call me. Everybody does. Everybody has my cell phone number. You can have it too. If you have a good idea, especially if it's a little bit baked, just call me and we'll see if we can put together the teams or put you in touch with the right staff people to see if there's feasibility and let you know what resources we have to make it happen. Did I see Rep. Livingston and Jim Greener here? So I just want to call them out as being housing champions that have joined us tonight.
All right, one last audience question, and then I have one last question for the panel. I hopefully I won't butcher this question, but what funds make real and sustainable affordable housing or permanent supporter housing? I don't know who was trying to ask this question, or maybe it came from online. Yes. So which is a better use of the funding? Is it towards affordable housing or permanent supportive housing? Is that the question?
No, it's very clear, and I appreciate that. There we go. It's very clear, and I appreciate the conversation because this is part of our work, is that we have a passion to provide affordable housing, but there's no funding to help us do that. But having partners and working with the city, and Sheila and Mayor will have been very attentive, and Arthur Jemison very attentive to the needs and the requirements of what it takes to build affordable housing. So we've partnered with other programs to make that happen. So there's LISC out there. There's Mass Housing Investment Corporation. There are different organizations that are stepping up in conjunction with the city and state and making it happen, realizing it's a need. I really want to applaud the city for taking like the Blue Hill Ave parcels, making sure that there are parcels that are available to be built for affordable housing. And it's a tough task. And this administration is really committed to making it happen, and it's apparent.
All right, last question, right? And everyone has to answer it. And we're going to start with Joyce. So you're forewarned. Anyways, so the year is 2032. All right, 10 years in the future. What should our housing market look like by then? And what happened to homelessness?
So here's my ideal. 200,000 more housing units across the board in the state, at least. Big dream, housing being seen as a basic human right. And finally, I'd say, what if we got back to kind of some of the features of where we were in 1982? And just as a reminder, homelessness essentially did not exist then. Why? Because our federal government was making a major investment in housing, and we didn't have all these roadblocks and barriers to creation of housing across the market. So we had a much more adequate supply. So even if you were poor and struggling, there was somewhere that you had a roof over your head. So how about those features of 1982 and some of the best of what we've learned about providing supportive and better affordable housing for 2032?
Love it.
I'm a dream with you. And I think also that in 10 years, 10 years is not a lot of time, but I think that if we continue on the path of realizing the problem, acknowledging that there is a problem, and actually doing something about it. No more talking, let's just do it. And eliminate the silos. And what I'm hearing here is that we all have to talk, we have to communicate, share resources. And I'm super hopeful that the climate will look like in Back Bay 10%, maybe 13% in 10 years, and there'll be it'll be leveling the playing field of the housing market.
My prediction is at least half, cut in half. I'm not a statistician, but I don't agree with the numbers on the homeless. Personally, I think there's a whole lot more. But you don't see them all. But I'm hoping if you go with what you were saying, where the money is coming from and building more affordable housing, it shouldn't be a problem to cut those numbers in half in 10 years. That's just my personal opinion. I'm hoping and praying, but there it is.
I will be optimistic as well. Several years back, there was a focus on making veterans chronic homelessness a functional zero. And chronic homelessness can be made to a functional zero as a episodic short-term situation that folks get support with, just like cancer. Like cancer is a big deal, and it's significant and inherent to the human condition. And like, we have a lot of resources and a whole focused community at it, and folks don't cross the street when you say you have cancer. So I think we can get there.
Because I don't want to be a realist here. I don't want to do that. So I want us to continue to make much more progress on making sure that everybody has a home that they can afford. And I think that is building supply. I think that is building more affordable housing in very intentional ways. I also think that we solve this issue if we improve our transit system, right? Because if we had really good regional transit, then we could get people in and out of the city much more quickly and easily. And I think, one, we'd see more housing develop in other communities in Boston and outside of Boston, but it would also take less pressure on our housing stock and our costs associated. So we're going to continue to build. I'm just hoping for more of a regional response. I think it would improve our schools. It would improve the environment. It would have less people be in their cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping for a real big regional meaningful response.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are free to all. And I imagine in 10 years, we will be free to all. Right? And that's the hope, and that's the plan. And whatever the need is in 10 years, the library will meet it. And I certainly hope we can offer more fun to people, and right? We will be here no matter what the need is.
All right, I have to announce that the library is closing at 8 and we need to be out of here by 7:45, right? Or else they'll lock us in here, right? A Night at the Library, a new movie, right? Anyways, I want to thank Joyce, Chanda, Frank, Matt, Sheila, Jonna. This was a great event tonight. I think Matt, you're on to something. We can do the homeless moonshot, like a moonshot to end homelessness. I mean, we're actually, as you know, Sheila, your slide showed that we're already a leader in affordable housing. And we don't have, the problem here is not gotten out of control like LA or San Francisco. We actually could end homelessness, maybe not in 10 years, maybe 20, but we're on the right track, right? Anyways, thank you, everybody. Thank you to NABB for organizing this. Thank you, the library, for hosting us. I guess we'll probably do this again next year too, right? Anyways, thank you.